The sunrise painted San Francisco Bay in shades of rose and gold, but Victoria Chen couldn't appreciate its beauty. She stood motionless in her walk-in closet, staring at the custom Vera Wang gown that should have made her the perfect bride in exactly 18 hours. Instead, she clutched her phone with trembling fingers, reading the email that had arrived at 4:23 a.m. Victoria, I can't go through with this. By the time you read this, I'll be on a flight to London. The partnership offer from Whitmore and Associates is too good to pass up. I know the timing is terrible, but I realized I want my career more than I want marriage. I left grandmother's ring on your dresser. I'm sorry. Daniel. The words blurred as tears she refused to shed burned behind her eyes. 3 years together, reduced to a 4-line email. Not even the courtesy of a phone call or a face-to-face conversation. Just digital cowardice from the man who'd promised to love her forever. Her reflection in the full-length mirror showed a woman she barely recognized. Her usually immaculate appearance was already beginning to crack. Silk pajamas, wrinkled, long black hair tangled from a restless night, makeup smudged from tears. She didn't remember crying. This wasn't the composed hotel heiress who'd been featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 just 6 months ago. The buzzing of her phone shattered the silence. Her wedding coordinator's name flashed on the screen. Victoria let it go to voicemail. Then came another call from the florist, another from the caterer. Each missed call represented another person she'd have to tell, another layer of humiliation to endure. 400 guests were expecting to witness the Chen-Morrison union at the St. Francis Cathedral tomorrow afternoon. The ballroom at her family's flagship hotel had been transformed into a wonderland of white orchids and twinkling lights. The 7-tier cake waited in the refrigerator, each sugar flower handcrafted to perfection. Victoria picked up the antique sapphire ring from her dresser, Daniel's grandmother's ring, supposedly in his family for generations. It felt cold and foreign in her palm, like evidence from a crime scene. She'd worn it for 8 months, fielding compliments about its unique Victorian setting, spinning dreams about passing it down to their own children someday. Her penthouse suddenly felt like a prison, every corner holding memories of the life she'd planned with Daniel. His architecture awards lined one shelf. His collection of first-edition books occupied another. Even the air seemed to carry his cologne, that expensive Tom Ford scent she'd bought him last Christmas. Without conscious thought, Victoria found herself pulling on running clothes, designer athletic wear she usually wore for photos at charity 5Ks, rather than actual exercise. She needed to move, to escape, to find somewhere that didn't echo with broken promises. The private elevator descended 30 floors in smooth silence. The doorman started to greet her, then seemed to sense something was wrong, merely nodding as she passed. Outside, the city was just beginning to wake. Cable cars clanged in the distance while delivery trucks rumbled through empty streets. Victoria began to run, her feet carrying her away from the familiar territory of Nob Hill, away from the world where she was supposed to be a blushing bride-to-be. She ran without direction or purpose, just needing to put distance between herself and the wreckage of her carefully planned future. Golden Gate Park stretched before Victoria like a green refuge from the glass and steel of the city. Her designer running shoes, more suited for boutique gym treadmills than actual pavement, were already giving her blisters, but she pressed on until her lungs burned and her legs trembled. Finally, she collapsed onto a bench near the Japanese tea garden, gasping for air. First time running from something, or running to something? The voice came from her left. Victoria turned to see a man sitting at the far end of the bench, someone she hadn't noticed in her exhausted state. He appeared to be in his early 30s with unkempt brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. A worn military surplus jacket hung loosely on his frame, and a tattered backpack rested beside scuffed boots. "Excuse me?" Victoria managed between breaths. "People who run through the park at dawn usually fall into one of those categories," he explained, his voice carrying an unexpected warmth. The running to folks have this determined look, checking their fitness trackers every 30 seconds. The running from folks, he gestured gently toward her. They look like they're trying to outpace their own shadows. Despite everything, Victoria found herself almost smiling. That obvious? The designer workout clothes and the $1,000 shoes were my first clue, he said with gentle humor. But it's really the look in your eyes, like someone just pulled the ground out from under you. Victoria studied him more carefully. Despite his homeless appearance, his eyes were sharp and intelligent, crinkling at the corners when he smiled. There was something about his presence that felt oddly comforting, like he'd witnessed enough pain to understand hers without judgment. "Ethan," he said, extending a hand that was surprisingly clean despite his circumstances. "Victoria!" She shook it, noting the firm but gentle grip. "So, Victoria with the expensive shoes and the broken heart, what's your story?" The directness of the question should have offended her, but instead she found herself responding to his straightforward manner. "My fiancé sent me an email at 4 this morning. The wedding's tomorrow. Was tomorrow." She corrected herself, the reality hitting fresh. Ethan whistled low. "Email? That's cold. Let me guess. Found a better offer?" "Job in London. Apparently a partnership at a British firm trumps marrying me." Victoria was surprised by how easily the words came out to this stranger. "His loss," Ethan said simply. "Though I'm guessing that's not much comfort right now." 400 guests, Victoria heard herself say. "The cathedral, the reception at my family's hotel. My mother is going to have an aneurysm. She's been planning this wedding since I was 12. "Ah, one of those families." Ethan nodded knowingly. "Where your life is less about what you want and more about maintaining the right image." Victoria stared at him. "How did you—" "Lucky guess. Plus, you mentioned your family owns a hotel fancy enough for a society wedding. That narrows things down." He leaned back on the bench, completely at ease despite the awkwardness of their situation. "You know what the interesting thing about losing everything is?" "What?" "You finally get to see what's actually yours, and what was just decoration." Ethan picked up a fallen leaf, twirling it between his fingers. "When all the external stuff gets stripped away, the expectations, the plans, the image you're supposed to maintain, you might be surprised by what's left." "What if there's nothing left?" Victoria voiced the fear that had been gnawing at her since reading Daniel's email. "Impossible," Ethan said with such certainty that she almost believed him. "There's always something. Usually, it's the thing you've been ignoring, because it didn't fit the plan." They sat in comfortable silence as the park began to fill with morning joggers and dog walkers. Victoria realized she hadn't thought about the wedding logistics in several minutes, a small reprieve from the chaos awaiting her. "I should go," she said eventually, though she made no move to stand. Hundreds of calls to make, deposits to forfeit, a life to somehow piece back together. "Or," Ethan suggested, "you could sit here a bit longer and let the world wait. It's not like the wedding is going to get more canceled if you take another hour." Despite everything, Victoria laughed, a real laugh that surprised them both. "That's terrible advice. The best advice usually is." Ethan's smile was infectious. "Besides, when's the next time you'll have a perfectly valid excuse to sit on a park bench with a questionable stranger instead of doing what you're supposed to do?" Victoria found herself settling back onto the bench. For the first time since reading Daniel's email, she could breathe without feeling like her chest might cave in. The sun climbed higher, warming her face, and somewhere in the trees, birds began their morning songs. The world hadn't ended, even if it felt like it had. "Tell me something," she said. "How does someone who gives such good advice end up—" She gestured vaguely at his circumstances. "Living in the park?" Ethan finished. "That's a story for another day. Right now, this is about you figuring out who Victoria is when she's not being someone's fiancée or someone's daughter. 1 week after what should have been her wedding day, Victoria found herself walking through Golden Gate Park again. The crisis management had been handled with the efficiency her mother demanded. Vendors notified, deposits forfeited, gifts returned. The Chen family's public relations team had crafted a carefully worded statement about mutually deciding to pursue different paths. The only thing left was figuring out how to live in the aftermath. She spotted Ethan in what she'd come to think of as his usual spot near the botanical gardens. Today he was sketching in a worn notebook, completely absorbed in his work. As she approached, she could see the drawing, an incredibly detailed rendering of the pagoda across the lake. "You're an artist," she said, settling beside him without invitation. Ethan glanced up, and his face brightened. "Victoria of the broken engagement. How's the world of canceled weddings treating you?" "About as well as expected. My mother has already compiled a list of eligible bachelors, complete with financial portfolios and family backgrounds." Victoria pulled out a container of food from her bag. "I brought lunch. Figured it was my turn to provide something." Ethan eyed the container from her family's 5-star hotel restaurant. "That's unnecessary. Please, you've given me more useful advice than my therapist. Consider it a consulting fee." She opened the container, revealing gourmet sandwiches and imported cheese. "Besides, I needed an excuse to escape. Mother's moved into my guest suite temporarily to help me through this difficult time." "Meaning to manage your recovery?" Ethan accepted half a sandwich with a grateful nod. "Meaning to ensure I don't do anything to further embarrass the family name, like spending time with strange men in the park." Victoria bit into her sandwich, savoring the small act of rebellion. "About that," Ethan said carefully, "I should probably tell you that you weren't always homeless," Victoria interrupted. "I figured that out. Your vocabulary, the way you hold yourself, the fact that you can discuss everything from philosophy to international finance. So what's your story, Ethan? Tech startup gone wrong? Bad investments?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Something like that. I was in tech, actually. Had a company, investors, the whole Silicon Valley dream." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Then I discovered my business partners were involved in some serious fraud. Investor money being funneled offshore, cooked books, the works." "You blew the whistle?" "Tried to. Turns out when you go up against people with deep pockets and deeper connections, they can make your life very difficult very quickly." His voice carried an edge of old anger. "Frozen accounts, legal battles that drained what they couldn't freeze, strategic character assassination. Within 6 months, I went from CEO to sleeping in shelters." Victoria felt a surge of indignation on his behalf. "That's horrible. Couldn't you fight back?" "With what resources? By the time I realized how orchestrated it all was, I had nothing left to fight with." Ethan returned to his sketching. "Besides, in a strange way, they did me a favor. I spent so many years chasing success that I never asked myself what I actually wanted. Turns out I'm happier drawing in the park than I ever was in board meetings." "But surely there must be something you can do. Legal recourse or—" "Victoria." Ethan looked at her directly. "Not every injustice gets corrected. Sometimes you just have to decide whether you're going to let it destroy you or teach you something." They were interrupted by Victoria's phone buzzing insistently. Her mother's face appeared on the screen. With a sigh, she answered. "Where are you?" Margaret Chen's voice was sharp with disapproval. "The Wetheringtons are here for tea, and their son Bradley just returned from Harvard Business School." "I'm in a meeting," Victoria said, winking at Ethan. "Very important. Can't be disturbed." "Victoria Chen, you are not at a meeting. I tracked your phone, and you're in that park again." Her mother's voice rose. "This has got to stop. People are starting to talk. Let them talk." Victoria ended the call and turned off her phone entirely, an act of defiance that felt both terrifying and liberating. Ethan watched her with a mixture of amusement and concern. "Tracked your phone?" Mother believes in comprehensive oversight. Victoria laughed, but it sounded hollow. She means well. In her world, a failed engagement is a crisis requiring immediate intervention. And in your world? Victoria considered the question. "I'm starting to think it might be an opportunity. Is that crazy?" The best revelations usually sound crazy, at first. Ethan closed his sketchbook. "But be careful, Victoria. It's easy to romanticize freedom when you've never really experienced consequences. Your mother might be overbearing, but she's also a safety net." Speaking from experience, speaking as someone who learned the hard way that principles are expensive. His smile was rueful. Not everyone can afford them. As the afternoon wore on, Victoria found herself telling Ethan things she'd never shared with anyone. Her doubts about taking over the family business, her fear that she'd been sleepwalking through life, her growing suspicion that Daniel had done her a favor by leaving. "The worst part," she admitted, "is that I'm not even sure I loved him. I loved what he represented. Stability, status, the next logical step in my predetermined life. And now? Now I have no idea what I want. It's terrifying." She paused. "And kind of exhilarating." Ethan nodded slowly. "Welcome to real life, Victoria. It's messier than the brochures suggest, but at least it's yours." As she walked home later, Victoria felt something shifting inside her, like tectonic plates realigning. The world looked different somehow, less certain but more vivid. She thought about Ethan's drawings, the quiet dignity with which he carried himself despite his circumstances, the wisdom born from loss. Her phone turned back on, showed 17 missed calls from her mother and 43 text messages from various family members and friends. Tomorrow, she would have to deal with all of it. But tonight, she would pour herself a glass of wine, sit on her terrace, and think about what it meant to build a life that was actually hers. 2 weeks had passed since the wedding that wasn't, and Victoria had developed a routine that would have horrified her former self. Morning runs through the park, in proper running shoes now, afternoon conversations with Ethan, and evenings spent fending off her mother's increasingly creative matchmaking attempts. Today she found Ethan sitting with someone else, a woman in her 40s wearing a business suit that had seen better days, crying quietly while Ethan listened with that particular stillness he had, the kind that made people feel truly heard. Victoria hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but Ethan waved her over. "Grace, this is Victoria." "Victoria, Grace. She's going through a rough patch with her company." Grace looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Rough patch is an understatement. 20 years building my consulting firm, and my business partner just emptied our accounts and disappeared to Costa Rica." Victoria felt a sympathetic pang. "I'm so sorry, that's awful." "Ethan's been helping me see that maybe it's a sign," Grace managed a watery smile. "Time to rebuild, but differently this time." They talked for a while, and Victoria watched Ethan work his particular magic, not offering false comfort or easy solutions, just helping Grace see her situation from different angles until she found her own clarity. When Grace finally left, looking steadier than when she'd arrived, Victoria turned to Ethan with new understanding. "You do this a lot. Help people, I mean. People in crisis tend to end up in parks." Ethan shrugged. "Sometimes they just need someone to listen without an agenda." "How many people have you helped?" "I don't keep count. It's not about the numbers." Victoria studied him, really looked at him. Despite living rough, he maintained a quiet dignity. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner gentle but never pitying. She thought about all the therapists and life coaches her mother had hired over the years, none of whom had helped her see herself as clearly as this homeless artist had. "I have a proposition," she said suddenly. Ethan's expression grew wary. "Victoria, hear me out. My guest house is sitting empty. It's completely separate from the main house, has its own entrance. You could stay there while you get back on your feet. I can't accept that. Why not? You clearly have a gift for helping people. Maybe you could formalize it somehow. Life coaching, counseling, something. You just need stability to figure it out. She pressed on before he could object. It's not charity. I'd actually be asking you for help. With what? Keeping my mother at bay, for starters. She's been showing up with eligible men like some kind of demented matchmaker. Having a male guest might slow her down. Victoria tried for levity, but her voice turned serious. And maybe helping me figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be perfect for everyone else. Ethan was quiet for so long that Victoria started to regret her impulsiveness. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. There are things about my situation you don't understand. Then explain them. It's complicated. He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture she'd learned meant he was truly conflicted. My past isn't as simple as I made it sound. There are reasons I've stayed away from my old life. Legal reasons? No, nothing like that. Personal ones. He met her eyes. Victoria, you're rebounding from a major life upheaval, making big decisions. Right now, don't. Victoria surprised herself with the sharpness of her tone. Don't dismiss this as some post-breakup crisis. I've spent 2 weeks thinking about this. You're the first person in my life who's ever made me question whether I'm living my own life or just performing it. That doesn't mean you should invite a homeless stranger into your home. You're not a stranger anymore, and being homeless doesn't define you any more than being jilted defines me. Victoria stood, pacing with frustration. Why is it so hard for you to accept help? Because help always comes with strings, Ethan said quietly, even when people don't mean for it to. What strings could I possibly attach? I don't even know your last name. Blake. Ethan Blake. He stood as well, shouldering his worn backpack. And the strings aren't always visible at first. Victoria, you're used to a world where problems have solutions, where money and connections can fix things. My world doesn't work that way anymore. Maybe. That's exactly why you should accept, Victoria countered. Because I need to learn how your world works. Because I'm tired of living in a bubble where everything is transactional and calculated. Ethan studied her for a long moment. What do you really want from me, Victoria? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to fully acknowledge. I want to help someone who helped me, she said finally. I want to do something that makes sense to me, not to my family or society or anyone else. And maybe... She hesitated, then pushed forward. Maybe I want to spend more time with someone who sees me as Victoria, not as the Chen Hotel heiress or the woman who got left at the altar. This is a bad idea, Ethan said, but his resolve was clearly weakening. Probably. But I'm tired of only having good ideas. Victoria pulled out her business card, writing her personal number on the back. The offer stands. No pressure, no expectations. Just a safe place to stay and a chance to figure out your next move. Ethan took the card, his fingers brushing hers, in the exchange. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. As Victoria walked away, she could feel him watching her. She didn't turn back, didn't want to pressure him further, but she hoped, with an intensity that surprised her, that he would call. That evening, as her mother launched into another lecture about appropriate behavior for women of their social. Standing, Victoria found herself thinking about strings and safety nets, about the price of principles and the cost of comfort. Her phone remained silent. No call from Ethan, but somehow she knew he was wrestling with the same questions she was. Change, she was learning, wasn't just about making different choices. It was about understanding why you'd made the old ones in the first place. The call came at midnight, 3 days after Victoria had made her offer. Ethan's voice was strained, asking if he could take her up on the guest house arrangement. When Victoria picked him up near the park, he was soaked from the unexpected rain. carrying everything he owned in that same tattered backpack. "No questions tonight," he said as he got into her car. "Please." Victoria respected his request, driving in silence to her estate in Pacific Heights. The guest house sat at the back of the property, a charming cottage that had once been servants' quarters, now renovated into a modern living space. She handed him the keys, showed him where everything was, and left him to settle in. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Ethan was the perfect tenant, quiet, respectful, almost invisible. He spent his days job hunting and his evenings reading in the garden. But Victoria noticed things. The way he navigated her kitchen with the confidence of someone used to high-end appliances. How he unconsciously straightened his posture when her mother appeared. The occasional phone calls he took in private, speaking in low, urgent tones. The truth began to unravel on a Thursday afternoon. Victoria came home early from a meeting to find Ethan in her study, staring at the business section of the Chronicle. His face had gone pale. "What's wrong?" she asked. Wordlessly, he handed her the paper. The headline read, "Blake Enterprises CEO returns from sabbatical, announces major acquisition." Victoria looked at the accompanying photo. A clean-shaven man, in an expensive suit who bore an unmistakable resemblance to Ethan. "Your brother?" "My father." Ethan's voice was hollow. "He's telling people I've been on sabbatical." The pieces started falling into place, but Victoria waited for him to continue. "Blake Enterprises. You probably know it. We're in everything from real estate to tech ventures." Ethan slumped in a chair. "I'm supposed to be running our Silicon Valley division. Was running it. Until 6 months ago. The fraud you mentioned was real, but it wasn't my business partners. It was my father. I discovered he was using our subsidiary companies to launder money for some very dangerous people." Ethan's hands clenched and unclenched. "When I confronted him, he gave me a choice: fall in line or lose everything." "So you chose to lose everything?" "I chose to walk away. Told him I was done, that I wouldn't be part of it." Ethan laughed bitterly. "He assumed I'd come crawling back when the reality of being cut off hit me. Froze my accounts, had me blacklisted, the whole show. He never imagined I'd actually stay away." Victoria sank into the chair across from him, mind reeling. "You're heir to Blake Enterprises. You're worth billions, or I was." Ethan met her eyes. "Every homeless person you've seen me help, every conversation we've had, that was real. This is who I am when I'm not being Ethan Blake III. The sabbatical story. His way of keeping up appearances. Can't have investors knowing his son chose principles over profit." Ethan stood abruptly. "I should go. This isn't fair to you." "Sit down," Victoria said sharply. When he didn't, she stood too, blocking his path. "You think I care about the money?" "You should. That's the world we're from, Victoria. The world where who you are matters less than what you're worth." "Is that why you hid it? You thought I'd treat you differently." "Wouldn't you have?" Ethan challenged. "If you'd known I was Ethan Blake, would you have sat on that park bench? Would you have trusted my advice, or would you have assumed I was just another rich guy playing at wisdom?" Victoria wanted to deny it, but honesty won. "I don't know. Maybe not?" "Exactly. For 6 months, I've been just Ethan. No expectations, no legacy, no one trying to leverage a connection. Do you know how free that's been? And the people you helped? Saw someone who understood loss because I'd lived it. Not some billionaire's son on a poverty tour." His voice cracked. "Grace and all the others, they trusted me because I had nothing to gain from helping them." Victoria moved closer, seeing the pain he'd been hiding. "You could have told me." "When? When you were grieving your engagement? When you were finding your own strength? You needed Ethan the park philosopher, not Ethan the runaway heir." "I needed the truth," Victoria said softly. "But I understand why you hid it." They stood in her study, rain pattering against the windows, the weight of truth between them. Finally, Ethan spoke. My father's announcement. It's a power play. He's expecting me to see it and come back. The acquisition he's announcing? It's built on the same dirty money I walked away from. He looked at Victoria. I have enough evidence to bring it all down, but whistleblowing is expensive, Victoria finished, and dangerous, and possibly futile. He owns judges, prosecutors, politicians. Ethan's shoulders sagged. This is why I stayed hidden. Not because I was afraid of poverty, but because I was afraid of this. The moment when I'd have to choose again between safety and integrity. Victoria made a decision that would have shocked her former self. Then we fight. We? You helped me see that I was living someone else's life. Now it's my turn. She thought of her family's connections, their law firm, their own considerable resources. The Chen family has influence too, clean influence. Victoria, you don't understand what you're risking. I understand perfectly. I'm risking the safe, predictable life I was going to have with Daniel, the one where I never asked hard questions or made waves. She met his eyes steadily. I'm okay with that risk. Ethan studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. This isn't a park bench philosophy discussion anymore. This is real, with real consequences. Good, Victoria said. I'm tired of theory. Let's see what happens when principles meet practice. Over the following weeks, they built their case carefully. Victoria's family lawyers, initially skeptical, became believers when they saw Ethan's evidence. The Chen family's media connections helped ensure the story couldn't be buried. When the news broke, Blake Enterprises' heir exposes father's money laundering scheme. It sent shockwaves through the financial world. Ethan's father fought back viciously, but the evidence was overwhelming. As the empire of lies crumbled, Ethan stood tall, no longer hiding, no longer running. The homeless artist from the park and the billionaire whistleblower were the same person, and somehow that made him more real, not less. On a foggy morning, 3 months later, Victoria found Ethan on their bench in Golden Gate Park. He wasn't homeless anymore. The legal battles had restored his legitimate assets, but he still came here to think. Any regrets? She asked, settling beside him. About my father? No. He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. About hiding who I was from you? Yes. It brought us together, Victoria pointed out. The broken bride and the mysterious stranger. Very romantic. Very complicated? Ethan corrected, but he was smiling. Are you sure you want to be with someone who chose principle over profit? It's not a very practical life choice. Victoria thought about the hotel empire she was restructuring to be more ethical. The wedding that had never happened. The life she'd rebuilt on her own terms. Practical is overrated. I prefer authentic. As the fog lifted, revealing the city beyond, Victoria realized that sometimes the best love stories begin not with perfect meetings or grand gestures, but with two broken people on a park bench, discovering that the worst moments of their lives might actually be the beginning of something real. The wedding dress still hung in her closet, but it no longer felt like a ghost. Now it was just a reminder of the life she'd almost lived, before she found the courage to choose her own path and the man who'd helped her find it, even when he was lost himself. In the end, they both learned the same truth. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what actually matters. And what mattered wasn't the money or the status or the perfect plans, but the choice to be real in a world that preferred performance. As they walked back through the city together, Ethan no longer hiding and Victoria no longer pretending, they were just two people who'd found something worth more than all the wealth they'd walked away from, the freedom to be themselves and someone to share that freedom with.